Amy Lewis had dreamed of the Olympics since she was 4 years old, standing in her grandmother's living room in her socks, spinning until she fell dizzy onto the carpet. 17 years later, she stood in the tunnel beneath the arena. The roar of 20,000 people vibrating through the concrete walls and into her chest like a second heartbeat. She was ready. She had always been ready. The vault was her best event. She had landed it 10,000 times in practice. A clean, powerful Yurchenko double, her body tucking and spinning through the air like something that had no business defying gravity, but did it anyway. Her coach, a quiet Romanian man named Petru, always said the same thing before she ran. Trust your feet, Amy, they know the way. She trusted her feet. She did not trust the floor mat, which had been laid slightly off-center that morning during setup. Nobody noticed. It was less than 2 centimeters. It would be enough. When Amy sprinted down the runway, the crowd felt the electricity of it. Her footsteps were sharp and rhythmic. Her eyes locked on the vault table. She hit the springboard perfectly, her hands connecting with the vault in a fraction of a second, and then she was airborne, spinning, tucking, the world a blur of light and noise and pure momentum. She came out of the second rotation, a half beat too early. Her feet hit the mat at the wrong angle, her left ankle folded. The sound was not loud, just a small, dry snap that only she and Petru heard. And then Amy was on the ground, sitting in a stunned silence while the crowd held its breath as one enormous living thing. She did not cry, and that surprised everyone, including herself. She simply looked down at her foot, which was pointing in a direction feet do not point, and said very quietly, "Oh." Petru was beside her in seconds. Then the medical team. Then the long, slow journey off the floor on a stretcher. Amy holding her hand up to the crowd in a wave that made 20,000 people exhale and applaud and press their hands to their hearts. 3 rows up in the stands, a 16-year-old girl named Priya watched Amy get carried off and felt something shift inside her. She had been a gymnast herself once, until a wrist injury in her second year of serious training had ended it. She had been angry about that for a long time. Watching Amy wave, calm, dignified, already somewhere beyond the pain, Priya stopped being angry. And Amy's ankle required surgery and 8 months of rehabilitation. She did not compete at the next Olympics. She became a coach instead, working with young girls in a small gym in Ohio. And she told them all the same thing before their vault runs. Trust your feet, they know the way. She never told them about the 2 centimeters, 3 weeks before Amy's fall in a qualifying meet held in Sao Paulo. A Brazilian gymnast named Clara Souza stood on the beam 4 meters above the competition floor and allowed herself 1 breath before her dismount. It was the only indulgence she permitted herself in competition. 1 breath, full and deliberate, the way her mother had taught her to calm herself before any large thing. She took the breath. She launched. She had performed the dismount perhaps 8,000 times. On the 8,001st, her angle of rotation was 3 degrees off, an error invisible to any spectator, barely registerable on slow motion replay, but enough to change everything about how she landed. The impact traveled up through her heels, her knees, and arrived in her lower back with a sudden, white-hot certainty. She fractured 2 vertebrae. She lay on the mat for what felt like a very long time, though the medics reached her in under 30 seconds. What she remembered most later was not the pain, which was considerable, but the strange calm that followed it. Well, she thought, looking up at the lights of the arena. That happened. 14 months of recovery followed. 2 surgeries. A period of about 6 weeks when the doctors were not entirely sure she would compete again at all, though they didn't say this to her directly. Clara had the sense they were protecting her from something, which she found quietly irritating. She had grown up in a household where her father worked construction and her mother was a nurse. She was not accustomed to being protected from facts. When she returned to competition, something had changed in her. Not diminished, but deepened. She competed with a patience she hadn't possessed before, Where she'd once been electric and slightly reckless, she was now electric and precise. Her coaches noticed it, the judges noticed it. At the national championships, 2 years after the fracture, Clara Souza stood atop the podium. She had the X-ray framed and hung it in her bedroom, beside a photograph of her mother. In the Olympic Village itself, 3 days before the opening ceremony, a Japanese gymnast named Hanamori was moving through her warm-up routine in the practice gymnasium when everything went sideways. She described it afterward as feeling like a door slamming shut inside her chest. She lost her balance, not from a skill gone wrong, not from a misstep, but from nothing at all. One moment she was standing, and then she was not. She had an undiagnosed heart condition that had gone undetected for years. A structural anomaly, the cardiologists later explained. Not inherently lethal, but dangerous under the specific demands of elite athletic exertion. It was the kind of thing that could have been caught at 17 different points in her career, and wasn't. She survived. The recovery was long and careful and full of conversations she hadn't expected to have, with doctors and family members, and eventually, out herself. She retired from competition, not out of fear, but out of a genuine reordering of what she wanted from the years ahead of her. She took up coaching, then sports medicine, then advocacy. The experience led Japan's Olympic Committee to overhaul its athlete medical screening program entirely, beginning with comprehensive cardiac testing for all junior competitors. The policy was not announced with any particular ceremony. Hana was not invited to speak at any formal events about it. She found out it had passed through a short paragraph in a sports governance newsletter. She read it twice standing in her kitchen and then made herself a cup of tea. That seemed like enough. In the floor exercise final, in the last rotation of the last event of the competition, a 22-year-old American named Deja Watkins stood in the corner of the floor and tried not to think about her Achilles tendon, which had been talking to her in unpleasant ways since the warm-up. It wasn't torn yet. She was fairly certain of that. But it was telling her something. The way a stressed bridge tells you something before it collapses, not loudly, not dramatically, just a persistent vibration at the edge of awareness. She had one tumbling pass left. The pass was the hardest element of her routine. A combination she'd been training for 2.5 years, the thing that separated her score from every other competitor on the floor that night. She could remove it. She'd already done enough to medal, probably. The math wasn't entirely clear, but the bronze was likely hers already. She ran anyway. Actually, the Achilles tore on the landing, a sound like a thick rubber band snapping, if anyone nearby had been listening, which no one was, because the crowd was already on its feet. Deja's body had the instinct to fall, and she overrode it, because she had 4 counts of music left, and she had never in her life stopped a routine. Before the music stopped, she finished the phrase. She hit her final pose. Then she went down. The standing ovation lasted long enough that the medics had to wait at the edge of the floor mat before they could reach her. She sat upright, listening to it, which was the only thing she was capable of doing. Later, she would say that the pain arrived fully only when the music stopped, as though her nervous system had been politely waiting. She had scored a 13.4, good enough for bronze. At the hospital that night, a nurse who'd watched it on a television in the break room came in to check her vitals and said very quietly, "That was something." Deja, who had been awake for 19 hours and was running on competition adrenaline and whatever the painkillers hadn't yet reached, said, "Yeah, I think it was." These 4 women never appeared in the same room together. They didn't know each other's names at first, but their stories traveled through sports pages, through social media, through the quiet conversations of coaches and parents and young gymnasts sitting in gyms at 6 in the morning, wondering if it was all worth it. It was worth it. That was always the answer. Not because the pain didn't matter, but because the thing they were chasing, that spinning, soaring, gravity-defying thing, mattered more. My Amy Lewis retired from coaching at 61. At her farewell dinner, one of her former students asked her if she ever regretted that day at the Olympics. She thought about it for a long time. "I regret the mat," she said finally, "not the run." Years passed. Decades eventually. Gymnastics changed. The scoring evolved. The skills grew more dangerous and more dazzling. And each new generation of athletes stood in tunnels beneath arenas, listening to roars they had spent their childhoods imagining. Some of them knew the names Amy, Clara, Hannah, Deja. Most didn't. That was fine. That was how it was supposed to work. What carried forward wasn't the names. It was something harder to name. A quality passed from coach to athlete, from older competitor to younger one, in gyms that smelled of chalk and old leather at 6 in the morning. A willingness to run anyway, to finish the music, to wave on the way out, to understand, somewhere beneath the pain and the loss and the long months of rehabilitation, that the fall was never the whole story. It was only ever the middle of it,